Well, Miles got me the G.I. Joe movie license game for the Xbox 360. Thanks, I guess. I don't know anything about G.I. Joe other than one of them got married to an Autobot in a comic book one time. Braun got CoverGirl pregnant with an android baby. That crossover movie's gonna be nuts! But after my last review subject cast the US Army as a bunch of raging psychotics waiting to take over the world because we're all pansies, I suppose it'd be good to showcase the true American hero. Or really just play anything else other than Mind's Eye. Wait, what? So yeah, G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, licensed on the crappy G.I. Joe movie. And no, that doesn't narrow it down. The Joes are a secret organization of elite soldiers using advanced technology to fight the forces of evil across the globe. Oh, so it's like Megaforce! That is the best bad movie ever. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. The other half is violence. The game opens with staggering frame rate problems as our heroes are in the Arctic, tracking down a renegade organization called Mars, with our heroes from the movie, Heavy Duty, Scarlet, and what were you thinking with that melting Channing Tatum wax figure, Duke. Also aboard this truck is Baroness, a villain that they captured, when suddenly soldiers teleport inside the truck, grab Baroness, and leave behind a Cobra logo that the Joes don't recognize. You rat bastard, Miles. You're gonna make me rewatch the movie. Okay, Mars is from the movie as an arms manufacturer / vague proto-Cobra organization, and the Joes not knowing Cobra tracks, since I went back and checked and nobody calls the bad guys Cobra anywhere in the Rise of Cobra movie. But Baroness in the film was mind-controlled into being evil and shakes off the brainwashing by the end of the movie, so it makes no sense why she's here. This game can't take place before the movie because Duke wasn't a Joe yet. It can't take place during the movie because Cobra wasn't a thing, but it can't take place after the movie because Baroness shouldn't be evil anymore. Did they even get a plot outline to write the game, or did they take one look at it and throw it in the trash? Also, fun fact, Duke is voiced by Roger Craig Smith, who went on to become the definitive voice of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Man, it's so weird the way they just dissolve when they go down. You kidding me? Okay, now I'm mad. Let's move out. I'm bringing Ripcord home.
Well, legends have to start somewhere, I guess. Rise of Cobra is a third-person shooter with a quasi-overhead camera. You run forward while pinning down the fire button to shoot at enemies with an auto lock-on and infinite ammo. You have a cover system, health that regenerates faster behind cover, a dodge roll, and a melee attack for enemies that get too close. I'm told the game plays like the more modern 3D Contra games, or at least the ones that aren't titled Rogue Core. Each character also has a unique super attack that, as the game says, utilizes the brilliant special skills that got them a place into G.I. Joe. Skills like Duke firing a single underslung grenade, and Heavy Duty just firing his minigun a little harder for like 2 seconds. Truly amazing skill. And as you play, you charge up a power-up in the form of the accelerator suits, except the movie's accelerator suits were these badass Iron Man armors that let you run all the way across an exploding city and still fail to catch a single truck because the Joes are kind of incompetent. Here, they're just invincibility and a weapon buff that lasts for about 8 seconds. The game does drop items, but it took me ages to figure out what they do. Medals give you a charge of your special attack, and the rest are just points and score multipliers. This is admittedly the rare game where your score is important, since it gets you tokens to unlock new characters, but seriously? No health or weapon pickups, no shielding, no anything. You really just run forward, auto-target shooting everything in sight, and that's all there is. There aren't any outlandish enemy types, it's just endless turrets, guys with guns, and a few guys that try melee. Some just hit harder, and some have more health. It seriously feels like you're just shooting the same faceless goons every damn level. The phoning in that epitomize cheap 360-era licensed games. Not that the game doesn't try to convince you of the enemy variety by constantly stopping so your mission control can go, "Look out! That thing is bad!"
Elite assassins. Their bad news turrets can be bad news. Those hover blades are bad news.
And despite so much of the gameplay being automated, the shooting is still clunky as hell. You can't steer the camera, which makes looking for items a titanic pain in the ass. You're forced to slowly crawl through every nook and cranny of levels looking for pickups, and you need collectibles to unlock certain characters. Backtracking means never being able to see where you're going. Enemies will often be off screen, so you can't see what you're shooting. There are even times where your character is off screen because nobody respects the QA department. You have to man the right stick constantly to wrestle the auto-targeting onto an actual threat instead of the destructible terrain or another damn score pickup, or just to get your Joe to lock onto an enemy, period, since strafing or fleeing will often result in your Joe locking onto nothing. I've had Joes fail to take cover because the same button is used to dodge roll, and I've had Joes fire into their cover like the mechanics barely work. Snake Eyes, I think your visor needs cleaning. Dude, stop shooting the wall! But all that pales in comparison to how the game handles lives. Mainly because it doesn't. If you die once, you start the level over again. But you do have 2-player Joes at all times, and you only lose if both of them die at the same time. So you can afford to die a little bit, right? Yeah. Just one problem. The enemies are balanced with the assumption that 2 players are shooting at all times, so when you get knocked down to only 1 character remaining, now it takes forever and a half to kill anything in the friggin' levels, and the game slows down to an unbearable slog. Oh my God. You're often just better off restarting a level than trying to persevere with only 1 Joe. It'll save your sanity, if nothing else. And by the way, you have to select 2 Joes to accommodate the game's drop-in, drop-out co-op, but never play this game with a friend. We'll get to why in a minute. One would think that a strictly linear cover-based shooter where the game does all the shooting for you would be a pretty smooth experience. So, why do I keep dying? Seriously, I got about 6 levels in, and now I'm getting my ass kicked. I spent over an hour trying to complete this one desert stage. I don't know, maybe it's because the game keeps introducing enemies with so obnoxiously much health that they take minutes straight and like 500 bullets to kill a piece. Or maybe it's because the cover-based shooter keeps dumping you into areas with no cover so that you can't avoid fire. Or because what little cover you have is destructible and will be locked onto by your own characters. I don't know, maybe I keep dying because the enemies are coded to spray shots like it's a bullet hell shooter and can find spaces to where you can only dodge for so long. Or maybe it's because you only have about 4 hit points and you can't heal without that cover that you don't have! Seriously, look how freaking long it takes to heal without cover! And it's even slower if you're moving or shooting, which you're kinda doing all the time! And no, running away from enemies and retreating back into the level doesn't help. Enemies seem to have about unlimited range, and I've seen bullets fire through solid terrain to kill you anyway! So yeah, about 6 levels in, the game starts drowning you in concentrated machine gun fire from enemies that refuse to die, and you get pulverized! A momentary screw-up gets your health shredded like Kleenex, and if one Joe goes down, the other is pretty much guaranteed to follow, since now it takes even longer to chip away at the mile-long health bars. Don't most arcade shoot-em-ups like this have enemies that die in 1 or 2 hits? Not 1 to 200? And the best part of all this? A lot of these levels stretch over 20 minutes long. If you die, you've got 10 to 15 minutes of wasted life to get back to where you left off. And if you think you're okay because you crossed a checkpoint so you can continue midway through the stage, you do not respawn at a checkpoint if you die. Park it once and you start over. You also can't start from a checkpoint if you have to shut the game off to go do something and come back later. The checkpoints do absolutely nothing except revive a dead teammate. And on hard mode, they don't even do that. The checkpoints are just a cheap excuse to try and hide a mid-level loading screen. Okay, fine. Have your load screens. Then don't call them checkpoints, asshole! I seriously think that the devs just figured that since the easy mode gives you infinite lives, they just didn't have to bother with actual game balance. Just throw in a god mode where nothing matters, and fuck it! There is another way to heal up during the levels. You can press R1 to swap between your two characters, and the AI player is immortal and regenerates health quickly. But the game doesn't tell you either of those factoids. I had to look them up in the IGN review. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have to ask IGN for help? And this trick still isn't reliable, since you can shed health in seconds before it even registers to you to swap teammates. And you can't swap teammates if you play in the co-op. So the game explicitly designed for 2 players is also built to spite 2 players. Great. I resolved myself that I'd persevere for as long as I could on the normal difficulty and just see how long that I could hold out, but then it happened. I found a secret that not only allowed me to breeze through the rest of the game without bumping down the difficulty, but I only died on 1 level the rest of the campaign. As you complete certain levels or find dog tag collectibles, you unlock new playable characters for purchase, which is funny because the dialogue says that some characters just go on vacation if you never find their tags. Each Joe has a different weapon and special attack, and they added several playable Joes who weren't in the movie. You can tell they're not from the movie because they're not wearing all black! And this fine Doomarine-looking gentleman here is a playable character called Backblast. And if you think Backblast is a dumb name, call him Sir Breaker Doosucky Game! Backblast fights with a grenade launcher. Not only do his grenades deal massive damage, not only does the game not know what splash damage is to where all nearby enemies take the full damage at once, not only do his shots arc to nuke enemies that are behind cover, but his shots also knock enemies down to sharply reduce the incoming fire. And his special move is a spread fire that pulverizes anything close to you in a pinch. Backblast punches through enemies with loads of health in no time flat, and he makes mincemeat out of turrets and vehicles like they're nothing. It's ludicrous how powerful his shots are, especially if you use him in close quarters to just massacre enemies with rapid explosive shells. I paired him up with Snake Eyes, whose sword melee attack shreds enemies for quick kills, and I almost never had to worry about combat again. I barely even had to use the accelerator suits, because trust me, killing enemies as fast as possible is how you win this thing without dropping to kid mode. Knowing is half the battle. The other half is grenades and ninjas! The game's plot is pretty stock. It begins with a little pit stop to do the plot of the movie, where you stop Cobra from launching special nanite warheads that can devour a city through fart clouds. Yeah, the movie sucks. What do you want? And you also have to rescue some Joes, as they've captured Heavy Duty, Snake Eyes, and Ripcord. Oh no, not Marlon Wayans' character. Now who will make 50 Shades of Black? You find out Cobra has a teleportation system called Mass because of their weight. So yes, they wrote in an excuse for why enemies cheaply teleport into the map for constant annoying ambushes. The rest of the plot is the Joes tracking Cobra's teleportation system to new bases and blowing them up. You track Cobra to a desert where they're trying to steal a big-ass gemstone, and you track them to a jungle where they're trying to steal a meteorite, all of which is somehow powering up their teleporter so that they can warp armies anywhere on the planet. All of this is conveyed to you via technobabble just to hear the game's endless support characters talk. There's a brief bit of intrigue where a scientist helping the Joes is a traitor, only for him to just vanish and never get resolved. The only quasi-interesting part of the story is the characters constantly going back and forth calling the villains Mars or Cobra. Which is weird because Mars kind of is Cobra, but then there's a snow level where Cobra is stealing Mars weapons, so they're stealing from themselves?
I had to fall back. Those Mars guys. Cobra you're calling them?
And then you get to the jungle level where they introduce Destro and Cobra Commander, and the Joes have no idea who either of them are.
Silverface said Commander more than once, too.
He
same commander again. The transmission we saw from that guy with the chrome dome.
Okay, if you haven't seen the movie, you lucky bastard, Destro and Cobra Commander don't actually become Destro and Cobra Commander until the last 4 minutes, and then they're immediately captured by the Joes, and they don't escape until the sequel 4 years later. So there is exactly 1 minute of screen time in which this entire game could plausibly take place. They didn't give a shit about trying to line up with the movie they're licensed on. I think they try to bridge the movie with the game with a single load screen that might randomly pop up, saying that Cobra Commander was captured on Duke's first mission, but then he was rescued by Storm Shadow. Yeah, setting aside that Storm Shadow was kinda busy being dead, why don't the Joes know who Cobra Commander is if they admit that they had him in custody?
Breaker and his tech team are still digging through transmissions to make sense of all this commander talk.
Forget the movie, the game can't keep continuity with itself! For the record, there's also a load screen saying that Scarlet is banging Snake Eyes. It's better than the movie, which paired her with the guy who filmed himself having sex with the Annabelle doll. Yes, that is an actual movie!
It's totally inapplicable to anything that's going on here. And it's dumb.
Since I'm using the characters who don't suck, most of the game is just circle strafing while shooting through waves and waves of the exact same enemies until the level ends and you go to the next environment to shoot the same crap some more. The game's either a broken train wreck or a mind-numbing chore. Sometimes you'll get lucky and they drop a giant robot in who just has a crap load of health, but that's all it is, a crap load of health. A hint screen flat out admits these things were designed for co-op, which kind of admits they were meant as game breakers for the solo players. What's funny is the accelerator suits are hard-coded to kill anything that's not a full boss in one punch, so these hulking mechs go down to a single "I am a man!" Even the environments look endlessly copy-pasted and repetitive. Every Cobra lab looks identical to the last Cobra lab. Sometimes you get vehicles that let you invincibly blast through enemies so the game takes even less effort, except the vehicles only sort of work on tank controls, so they feel like hot garbage to actually steer. And the vehicles do have health, but they don't have a visible health bar, so you have absolutely no idea how close one is to blowing up. And there's one level that gives you a tank for about 10 seconds because it immediately runs into barriers that the tank can't cross. What? The most you ever get for variety are 3 or 4 brief minigames where you use a satellite cannon to laser a ton of enemies to death, protecting an objective of some kind. And even that barely wakes up the game. It just makes you wonder, is there a single good reason why G.I. Joe doesn't just use its satellite laser weapons to nuke most of Cobra's arsenal from orbit, instead of making me do all the work? Or hell, they say that G.I. Joe has hacked Cobra's teleporters so that you can swap Joes in the middle of a mission. Is there a reason we can't, like, warp a bomb into a Cobra base? Or why Cobra didn't just warp bombs into the Joe's base? You sure it's knowing that's half the battle and not, like, common sense? Only some levels have teleporters to change characters in mid-mission, which is nice, but then most levels have these giant blue doors that only certain characters can open. If they're in the same room as a teleporter, then what is the point? And if they're not next to a teleporter, then you get screwed out of collectibles for not picking arbitrary characters. The playable Joes are divided into classes, commandos, soldiers, and heavies, except there's barely any distinction between the characters at all. I had Commando Snake Eyes and Heavy Backblast for most of the game, and I couldn't tell any difference in their movement speeds or health bars. The major character differences begin and end with their weapons and their special moves. Best I can figure, the heavies are meant to have slightly better guns and the commandos have better melee attacks, but that kind of just means by design that the soldier class sucks at everything. You don't even get any personality out of the team members that you select. There are a little over a dozen characters, and and they didn't want to have to write and record lines for all of them to go with any particular situation. Hours on end of playing Backblast, and I got him to say exactly one line of character traits all damn game. That's probably why almost all the game's dialogue is your support team babbling over the gameplay, discussing overly complicated exposition, telling you that every new enemy is bad news, and reminding you every single time you need to blow up generators.
You'll need to take out their generators and the satellite dish to keep your eyes peeled for generators.
Backblast is approaching the generator. The generator is losing power. And of all the Joes who yammer endlessly into your comms, Hawk, Stalker, Breaker, Dataframe, Dial Tone, Tunnel Rat, Snowjob, Dusty, Wild Bill, Recondo, only 2 of them are from the movie. So they added more than half a dozen pointless support characters interrupting every few minutes, because otherwise we'd just be trekking through lifeless terrain in dead silence. And of course, being a major cartoon comic and toy property based on having marketable, larger-than-life characters, they have boss battles with iconic Cobra villains. You fight Destro, and he's a horde battle against tons of basic enemies, while Destro just kind of stands there doing nothing. You shoot him a whole lot, but that's it. And then you fight Baroness, who stands there getting shot while you fight hordes of basic enemies. And there's Firefly, who shakes things up by sometimes standing somewhere he can't get shot while you fight hordes of basic enemies. I'm starting to get the sense that this game was rushed. Also, I don't know anything about G.I. Joe, but is Firefly supposed to look like a generic-ass regular soldier wearing black camo in broad daylight in the desert? They should change his code name to Swamp Ass. The only boss who actually fights you is Storm Shadow, who just shows up twice out of nowhere for absolutely no reason, and then he pisses off when you win. And he was so crowbarred into the game that they even copy-pasted the room where you fight him. And you know what else they copy-pasted? This obnoxiously long fight with a gunship that you have to do 3 separate times. This was all they had for mini-bosses. I guess the game was rushed to strike while the G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra iron was hot. Man, I'm getting bored. I guess I should probably at least try some of the other Joes. Let's buy Shipwreck. He sounds like he'd have a kick-ass weapon to play. He carries a shotgun. Shit. Okay, let's unlock Beachhead. Stupid-ass name, but what's he got? Automatic shotgun. Double shit. Okay. Don't believe the game's menus. I should actually try using Beachhead before I pass judgment on his stupid name. At the literal second that I removed Snake Eyes from my team, I hit a door that requires him to open. Triple shit! Beachhead is terrible. His weapon is a spread gun that barely does crap to all the obnoxious damage sponge enemies, and his special attack throws out some landmines. Landmines that do not reliably hit a single frickin' target. But this level doesn't have a teleporter, so I'm stuck dragging his useless ass to fight Baroness. Quadruple shit! Nice to have confirmation that I've been playing as the only useful members of the team, but still, I guess I should at least try the other characters. Duke, Scarlet, and Heavy Duty are the basic starter characters who just fire kind of basic weapons and specials. Shipwreck's shotgun barely does anything unless you're really close to enemies, meaning that he's barely useful some of the time and useless everywhere else. But he's got a cute parrot. That parrot's gonna get shot. Kamakura is just Snake Eyes, but he moves faster and has much worse attacks. In other words, take away the one reason you use Snake Eyes in the first place. And why does Kamakura look like Kick-Ass? Agent Helix has 2 handguns that are, slightly above average, but her special is a shield that does nothing. It doesn't move, it only lasts a few seconds, and you can tell that it doesn't even help you heal. It doesn't even block all enemy weapons. Seriously? You suck! Gung Ho has a grenade launcher, but it actually fires like a rocket launcher, but it's actually one of the worst weapons in the game. I don't know how explosions deal this little damage. Seriously, look how friggin' long it takes to clear out enemies as the average Joes. If you don't use the overpowered characters, this thing's pure unbearable tedium. Lord help me, Ripcord is one of the better characters in the game. His special move is a turret that deals tons of heavy damage. You can't control what the turret targets, but it demolishes shit. And no, having a turret has nothing to do with Ripcord in the film, but cracking bad jokes and pestering Scarlet aren't video game skills. And because I'm dedicated, I even unlocked the secret bonus level that unlocks Sergeant Flash. And given that the bonus level has a fight that's vastly harder than any of the actual bosses, this secret unlockable Joe had better be worth it. Sergeant Flash fights with a freaking laser beam! It's about as good as Backblast's gun, but his special move does nothing! It just briefly stuns people who are about 2 feet away from him for a few seconds! It's got to be the worst special attack in the game! Why did they overbalance the special unlockable? Between this and the stupid-ass shield, I wonder if the devs even knew how their own game worked, or had time to playtest the characters at all. Or if they had time to playtest the bugs. Hi, disappearing skybox! Hi, batshit blue lines crossing the screen! Hi, enemies stuck in a wall, which happened multiple times! Hi, enemies zoning out and forgetting to move! Hi, simple terrain that took about a dozen attempts at combat rolls before I could cross it! Hi, item that dropped where I can't reach it because jumping is not a thing! Hi, getting stuck motionless in the ground until I die! Hi, Backblast shooting from cover without actually moving! Backblast wins by doing absolutely nothing! Hi, strobing vehicle! Hi, running in circles trying to get the damn lock-on to work! Hi, Backblast refusing to shoot his actual target like the lock-on is broken! Hi, 2 different sets of dialogue playing over the final boss cutscene!
Any part? No! This cannot be!
Believe it or not, they actually got one actor from the film to reprise their role in the game. Joseph Gordon-Levitt returns to voice Cobra Commander, probably because it sounds like he was the only actor that was legitimately excited for his role in the film. Some of his lines are pretty solid for Cobra Commander.
You've accomplished nothing. You have survived this long, but you cannot defeat Cobra!
And some lines are indicative that acting and voice acting are 2 very different skill sets.
But with the Mars arsenal at my fingertips, I will destroy you.
Cobra's final base is at the magnetic North Pole so that they can reuse all the Arctic textures from the start of the game again. And they basically just huck endless robot bullet sponges at you for half an hour straight. Of course, the final boss fight with Cobra Commander is just you shooting default enemies while blowing up the teleportation generators, except now they only drop 1 or 2 enemies at a time. This isn't even close to being the hardest fight in the game. And then Cobra Commander just kind of leaves and the Joes just shrug that all the villains escaped and go home and the game ends!
So consider this Cobra Commander a battle that has yet to begin.
What the hell? The credits don't even have a full score of music to them. They have 1 track that leaves loads of dead air and then replays. This shit was so rushed, it's not even funny. Like, even for being a phoned-in movie-licensed game, I thought for sure that this couldn't possibly be the real final boss. And it's not. But the actual finale isn't much better. You unlock a bonus level where you can play as Baroness, Destro, and Firefly escaping the Joe's prison and blowing up their mobile base. Yeah, who would have guessed that locking all the supervillains with metal-eating nanites together in the same metal cell with all of their equipment could possibly have gone wrong? So yeah, there are a few unlockable Cobra characters. Baroness has better movement speed, super overpowered dual plasma pistols, and a super move that throws a strong Hadouken. Destro has a giant screw-off rocket launcher, and Firefly gets a crappy machine gun and a special move with crappy range. Again, the soldier class sucks at everything. The only player character I'm missing is Storm Shadow. I think you have to track down a lot of hidden items to get him. And his profile says that he doesn't even use his ninja weapons, so literally what is even the point? They actually stop multiple times to say that the Joes hacked Cobra's nanomites to take control of their soldiers Do explain why you're still fighting Cobra goons while playing as Cobra. Yes, they were that lazy. There's even a point where Stalker calls you to thank you for picking up intel for the Joes, and the enemies keep calling you Joes! I'm starting to think this was thrown together at 4 p.m. the last Friday before the game shipped. So the true final boss is a few shooting galleries blowing up a ton of turrets and foot soldiers, and the true ending is the bad guys getting all their shit back to where nothing's really been accomplished. Still, blowing up the game's main menu is a unique kind of screw this, we're done. G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra is not a good game. At its best, it's a mindless shooter that makes you fight the same repetitive enemies for hours on end with only brief minor flourishes of variety, and that's if you stick to the overpowered characters. Otherwise, the game is a broken, oppressively hard disaster that counts on having an easy mode to excuse its problems. The large cast of player characters to play around with is probably the game's biggest strength, since they at least put some effort into making them distinct, and there are plenty of nods to the Joe franchise, from vehicles to toy-themed unlocks, that may give fans a kick, but by and large it's just dull and annoying. You know how Dragon Ball Z Sagas isn't a very good game, but then you unlock Broly and curb stomping all the enemies makes the game almost passable? It's like that. Or, a reference that someone other than myself might get. All that's left now is to end the video with a G.I. Joe-styled inspirational PSA, just like the olden days.
Hi, Duke. Oh, listen, I just wanted to remind you that the good guys always win. Even in the 80s.
You see this bruise? I got that a week ago. From slamming a futon because I was stuck for an hour on a shovelware game!